Welcome to Transformative Principal, where I help you stop putting out fires and start leading. I'm your host, Jethro Jones. You can follow me on Twitter at Jethro Jones.
Welcome to the Transformative Principal podcast. Today on the show, our guest is Opie Blackwell. Opie is the Ridgeview Charter Middle School principal in Georgia. Good morning, Opie.
Hey, good morning, Eric. Glad to be with you.
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised today when the Zoom turned on and I'm seeing Opie in Georgia on the email, and then I see a CU Boulder t-shirt.
Yeah.
I wondered if somebody hacked the Zoom. That's not what I expected coming from Georgia.
Yeah, no, it throws people for a loop, and that's why I wear it around here. I mean, every time staff members or even the kids see a CU Boulder shirt around the school in Georgia, they've got questions. Yeah, but that's my background. That's where I'm from. I grew up in Colorado.
Yeah, and you've been in the state of Georgia, high school English teacher originally, right?
Everybody's favorite subject, and did a little journalism teaching on the side, proof that all of us do things that we weren't trained for.
I can relate to that, Opie. Yeah, and we got connected through Jethro because he was actually in the audience when you were presenting at the AMLE conference recently.
Yeah, that's correct. So a team and I of teachers and a couple of my support staff members were down at the AMLE, the Association of Middle Level Education Conference, presenting on some interdisciplinary instruction work that we've been doing. And he was in the audience and got us connected.
Well, tell us a little bit about the success and I'm sure the hard work that your team has put in to the interdisciplinary teaming. What's that all about?
Well, I mean, for us, what it's all about is I think it is it's one of the hardest things to achieve. And so the reason that we were even, kind of talking about it, and I'm glad to do it today, is not because we're a shining beacon, but because, we had some success. And I think it's creating a groundswell here. And we wanted to share that with some colleagues. But what it's all about is, for these young adolescents in the middle school age range, there's so much that we can do at the middle school to make, teaching and learning better for them. But one of them is if the content areas have these connections, probably like all of us, if we can see connections in between what we're doing and other tasks that we're being asked to complete, then the learning is potentially better and obviously just more connected. So the interdisciplinary teaching and learning is really just about how can we connect concepts in between, in the case that we shared at this conference, math and social studies, but it could be any content areas, health and PE and art, or, common ones that people think of, English and social studies. But that's some of the work that we have been trying to get better at here, and one of the success stories that we were telling at this conference.
Yeah, and how have you guys seen that success show up? What's that look like as far as staff and students?
Well, for us, I think, what we found to be really important was just, first of all, acknowledging that this was something we needed to get better at. And first, let me say, the reason that interdisciplinary instruction is hard to accomplish sometimes is I think our teachers nowadays have so many things put on them, right? With just all of the state level things. We're asked to be great experts at our own content area and monitor student performance and be responsive to their needs, that the last thing that we can kind of get to is, let me be great at all of those things, and then let me also partner with somebody else in a totally different content and continue that good pathway forward. So it's hard to achieve. What it looked like to start for us was, because it's so hard, we knew we just needed to hold ourselves accountable for finally trying to make some progress. We actually wrote a grant, but that was our accountability tool, was to get some funding and some kind of, intrigue that we could give to the teachers that, hey, if we could we could get some great interdisciplinary instruction going, we've got some funding that we could do some really cool hands-on projects with the kids. Just something to kind of, number one, give us that accountability from the administrative side to help support this and make it happen, but also to give something to the teachers of, to kind of make it exciting. And so that was the start of it for us, was kind of this accountability tool. But I will tell you, Eric, what we felt really drawn to was we wanted to incorporate student voice into our interdisciplinary instruction in this whole project. We didn't want it to be, the typical kind of planning that we do, which is, the teachers figure out everything that we're going to do, and here's the assessment or here's the tasks. And so that for us was the real unique piece as well, of wanting to have our students help us plan it and implement it.
How did you do that? How did you get the kids involved with the planning and get their voice in the process?
A lot of work. We did some surveying of the kids and, just to kind of get some thoughts from them. I mean, where it started was we had to start obviously with our teachers, and we kind of did an all call, first of all, for teachers and content areas who might be interested in doing some of this interdisciplinary work, let them know about the cool kind of, funding that we had to give it a little jump start. And we had a couple of sixth grade teaching content areas interested, particularly in what ended up crossing the finish line was a math and social studies group in sixth grade. And so what we presented to the kids after we worked with those teachers a little bit was some of the standards that those teachers had remaining in, the rest of the year, or in this time frame that we had identified that we could do this interdisciplinary unit. And we truly let the kids, with some planning tools, and they partnered and grouped, we let the kids make some ideas and presentations to the rest of their class about how they thought these standards could be combined, and then what they would propose that we could do so that they could show us that they had mastered these standards. So, I mean, they truly were the mastermind behind what are the connections and then what could we do. And I think for the kids, what was really exciting was the exciting part wasn't the standards for them. But the exciting part was, oh my gosh, we get to plan potentially our own, kind of project or outcome. I mean, they were on fire.
That's awesome, Opie. I'm imagining sixth graders finding connections between math and social studies standards, which is not easy. I mean, I don't hear a lot of cross-curricular connections coming up between those two, and then presenting to their peers and proposing like how they're going to demonstrate what they learned, almost like assessment design. And
right.
And you're talking sixth graders.
Yeah, and they could totally, I mean, now obviously we had to, kind of, present some of the language and the standards in a way that the kids would understand. What they ended up trying to make some connections in between maybe were, some easier concepts for them. But we had picked a math standard that was surrounding like fluently adding and subtracting, whatever the language was, and dividing decimals, multi-digit decimals, and algorithms for those operations. And then a social studies standard that was around some money management. And so I think also that the selection of these standards kind of had, a real world application, that they could talk about, money and what they could do with money. So I think that was some of the excitement and maybe what made it a little bit easier for them. So I think there was some intentional selection, but yeah, I mean, the kids were totally able to do it. I mean, just, I think their wheels got spinning. It was something that they're not normally presented with. We learned, but when given the opportunity, they totally bought into it.
Yeah, just giving them a voice and letting them take some ownership. What did your teachers think when those students presented that? Were they as impressed as I am just hearing about it?
It was very invigorating for the teachers. I won't lie though, that it was hard for us, I think, to, as teachers and educators, and it's kind of hard to turn over that much control to the kids. We really had to think intentionally about, okay, well, how can we guardrail their planning, and what kinds of steps can we give them as we're letting them work with their groups so that they don't come up with these crazy and wacky ideas. Uh, but once we got to the point where we felt comfortable with that what we gave them, and the process that we were going to use with them that was going to keep them in the right kind of guardrails, then it became invigorating. I mean, don't we all get excited when we just get to see kids taking that kind of ownership and thinking outside of the box, and almost even before they do the work, showing us that they're going to be able to do what's required of them at the end. What's special about that is, I think one of our goals always in when we're teaching and working with kids, whatever the age range is, we want them to be successful on whatever the outcome is, whatever the project or the test is. But they don't always know as much as intimately about what's going to be required of them at the end. And in fact, that's our job, right? To try to make sure they know as we go along. But in this case, if we're able to do these kinds of interdisciplinary projects on grander scales, the kids already intimately know it. They know everything about what's going to be coming at the end because, I mean, in fact, they planned it.
Yeah, no, that's that's just exciting to think about, Opie. Is that kind of the same process, I would assume, after you got your first teachers that were willing to give this a shot, your math and social studies? I would assume that your other content areas and grade levels are getting excited and wanting to get involved and wanting to try this out. Would they use that same process of having students kind of propose those connections and designing, projects and tests?
So some of the group that presented at this conference with me about this were the teachers who did it. Obviously, I mean, they're the masterminds behind the project, and they did say over and over again that although initially almost a big roadblock in the project was this idea of letting the kids help us to plan it, now I think, having seen it and done it, and like you said, kind of felt that just that power. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it gives us that process to let the kids be just totally invested in the work that they're doing. It's a game changer from the standpoint of, at least at my school, and I think schools everywhere, one of the significant challenges we have nowadays is just maintaining that student engagement in the learning process, because learning's not always fun, and isn't always built around that quick, short attention span that they have. And not to say that this was the second by second glue that held it all together, but there's a different investment and buy-in from them that really was also miraculous for the teachers to see, how some of the kids who were not as typically engaged did the work in class, in math, and in social studies while they worked through this project. So we do now have some teachers. This was an interdisciplinary unit between math and social studies. But one of the outcomes was that the ELA teachers in 6th grade want to jump on board with doing this same project again this school year, because this was last year when we did it, and embed a new component to it, involving the writing process.
What's the best example you've ever seen of a interdisciplinary project or connection?
This may rival one of the best, and that may just be because it's in recent memory. but also because of the way that it involved the kids. Outside of that, I've seen some great interdisciplinary projects in between social studies and ELA teachers. It was again in 6th grade here at our school, doing a unit on, well, not a unit, but doing learning on water scarcity, and pairing a text connection with that. And the real driver was the social studies exploration of water scarcity in the East, and then finding, texts in ELA that they could read, different real world examples about that. I think that was another time, even though the kids didn't plan that one, that was another time when, kids can walk down the hall from a social studies class, and see a real world connection between that and what they're reading in ELA, which as a former ELA teacher, I'll own that you don't oftentimes feel like when you're reading, fiction texts, that there's a great real world connection. And so that was again kind of a game changer. And one of the reasons why, even though, like I said in the beginning, this is the hardest thing to try to achieve, when we can as educators, it really makes cool things happen for kids and teachers. Just, lifts everybody's spirits a little bit.
Yeah. And I asked that because I think when you talk with teachers about, what you could do and some of the possibilities with this, if you have a really exciting, fun example that you can see as a teacher, it's like, oh yeah, we could do that. I think about like Jethro's first book, School X. He talks about a school-wide example that they did at his middle school, every single content area, and it was a utopia project where students design their own country. And so you've got art incorporated with the design of the symbols and the flags, and math with their currency, and social studies with their type of government, and ELA standards incorporated with, writing out their rules and governmental structure. And it's like, holy cow, that would be really fun to see a kid go from first period to the end of the day for 2 weeks, and every single class connected to the same concept, same idea. And when you can show that to a teacher, it's like, oh yeah, we can do that. Kids will get excited about that. That's something they'll enjoy. The other example, I saw a high school teacher, this was years ago when the zombie craze was kind of coming out in movies and TV shows, and they did a really cool high school cross-curricular unit with zombies. So science, was talking about infectious disease, and math, rate of decay and exponential growth, and language arts, writing PSAs and health order announcements, which now with COVID, you could probably make a lot of the same connections, but kids get into that, and it's fun as a teacher to see that engagement. Like you said, more authentic, real world connections can really help kids see, like, you don't get a lot of questions during those units. Why are we learning this? When are we ever going to need to know this? Like you might in a traditional, math or any other content area class. We were just talking about just some good examples to get teachers excited and see that this is a doable thing. You mentioned, this is one of the hardest things to get going, and some roadblocks, like teachers really giving up control to get more of that student voice. One roadblock I know is a real challenge for teachers and you as a principal to try and solve. How do you get teachers the time to plan?
Yeah, no, you hit a nail on the head. And that is, time is always the thing that we don't have enough of. And like I said earlier, especially, when we're going to be so great at our own content area, then finding that time to reach out and connect with a colleague and do that deep planning can be difficult. So for us, we may be fortunate, but I know it's something that that we heavily value we have some built-in planning time for our teachers. They have PLC meetings each Wednesday. We're fortunate enough that we can do a double block of back-to-back planning time for them. And so we were able to still had to kind of carve it out on the agenda, but to give some heads up and warning that, in a couple of Wednesdays, we're going to be coming down and asking for and looking for some of these ideas in between interdisciplinary connections. Now, also, one of the things that we were able to do, whether that was through grant funds or, we were able to budget just some professional funds for teachers, is when we got enough of a groundswell going, we did give this particular group of teachers, as a little nod to all of the time that it was taking, we did give them, I think, another half a day once or twice during the real big planning process to kind of get this across the finish line. Now, I don't think we do that every time moving forward. I think, we needed a groundswell. I think it's totally doable if you can do some long range planning and just handle it in normal professional learning types of communities. But we did do that initially for some of our teachers because we needed it to move and feel like they had enough time and support to do it.
Yeah. And I know the common sentiment, and I empathize with it. There's just never enough. You can't have enough time. You don't have too much time to plan. And as a teacher, it's like, I'm so worried about all my own stuff I have to be ready for. Now you want me to do this with another teacher in a content area I don't know anything about, and they don't understand my standards. And
yeah, I will tell you, Eric, one of the things that we're doing this year to try to keep the thought processes alive more as we go on and throughout the year is we are having each content area, and one of our curriculum support folks kind of helps them with this, to just do a little, it's like the simplest component of visual planning that we keep on a little board down in our PLC collaboration room for each month that literally just says, the kind of the topic or big idea that each content area PLC is working on, with a short 1 or 2 sentence description below it about, kind of what that means. So that this year, when we are asking a little bit more frequently and regularly to try to find those interdisciplinary connections, that, we have a place where you can kind of visually go and take stock of, is there maybe an opportunity for me to connect with something that another content area is doing?
Yeah, that's a great idea. And there's probably a lot of times where you can find some real natural connections without having to, change your planning or your lesson structure when you can see it visually like that. That's a great idea for staff.
Yeah.
What do you feel like have been some of the challenges for you as an administrator to get this off the ground and get more classrooms involved?
Being intentional about it, I think we, my administrative team, kind of suffered from the same problems that I know our teacher teams were suffering from as well, which was, we had not devoted the time or the energy to really trying to get it across the finish line. We here at my school, have been fortunate enough to get some review committees to come in over the past few years that are just steeped in kind of middle school goodness. And one of the consistent pieces of feedback, because it does make a great middle school, and as I've described, it makes a great experience for the kids, is doing this interdisciplinary work. So for us, it just, was one of those components that we felt like we can't, ignore this and keep surpassing the opportunity for too much longer. And so we spent some time in our admin team meetings, kind of planning out how we could engage with the PLCs and just setting aside the time. Like with anything, when we gave it that intentionality and we developed a process, we could get it done.
Yeah, it works for sure. Awesome. Well, Opie, what's the best way for listeners to get in touch with you?
Me personally, probably through my email. I have a Twitter account, and I see the little red dots come in, but I'm not an avid tweeter. So for me personally, my email, which I'll be glad to give you, is just my last name, Blackwell, and the first letter is O, Blackwell O, at Fulton Schools with an S on the end .org. Probably like a lot of people, I feel like I'm on my email all the time. So I'd love to connect with people that way. I've touched base with a few people after this recent conference and would love to make some new middle or high or elementary school connections. So that's the best way. You can also, anybody can come check out Ridgeview. We don't have a great Twitter presence, but we do tell a lot of stories on Instagram and still the good old Facebook.
Yeah, great. Well, thanks, Opie. We like to finish with the big question on the show. What's one way principals can be a more transformative leader like you?
One of my core beliefs, I'm not a especially warm and fuzzy person by nature, but one of my core beliefs is that the relationships that we develop with our kiddos particularly, but also with our staff and amongst the staff is essential and is what can make a really great environment at a school. So, that kind of like hashtag relationships matter. So one thing that I think somebody could do is find a way to be intentional about personally recognizing a couple of staff members this week. I write notes. My amazing secretary gives me 4 note cards at the beginning of each week, and it's like my weekly challenge that I have to write 4 personalized notes to 4 staff members before Friday comes. I've still got my 4 right here, so I know what I need to do by today. And
today's Friday, right?
Today's Friday. Yeah, so I'm usually doing it at 5:30 or 6 before I leave, but I literally give myself that challenge. And they're just, sometimes I just say, hey, thanks for the effort that you're giving. It's noticed. It really is something that brightens people's days, and I see them up on walls and, taped behind their desks. And so, just recognize people and develop those relationships with whatever way works for you. But if it's a note, great.
I love that. That's great. And really, it connects well with the topic today, trying to get the interdisciplinary connections. There's a lot of curriculum and design and planning, but if you don't have those relationships between the staff, it's not going to work.
That's right.
You got to have that trust.
Right.
You got to have that willingness to take a risk and try that. So that's awesome. Well, thanks, Opie. Really appreciate having you on the show. Hopefully you get ready to get some resources shared out. I know, like you said, presenting at AMLE, I know you're already getting a few, but there's a lot of principals out there that could use some help. So thanks for coming on the show and showcasing some of the great things you and your staff are doing at Ridgeview Charter.
Yeah, glad to be here, Eric. Thanks for having me, and love to make some connections. So thanks for this opportunity.
Yep, you're welcome. Thanks, Opie.